Thank you so much. You know, what's fun about this is that I have been a customer of Zoho for probably 15 years. And so when Zoho approached me about doing these sessions, it was terrific because it wasn't just, oh, a company wanting to talk to me about, how to grow their market or how to share with people what they do. It was really a company that I had actually used. And I've been a customer for all these years. On different occasions, I've strayed and I've tried other systems, but I'll share with you some of the reasons why I still think that Zoho is just really a remarkable tool to use. So one thing I find is that I attend a lot of conferences. I come home with a lot of business cards, but it kind of ends there. Nothing really happens. And let me just share this. I was in New York last week with some childhood friends from my summer camp, and I got into Penn Station and I saw Zoho. And just a quick diversion here. I just thought it was so much fun to see Zoho and how it's gained an international presence here in the United States. So one of the things I want to talk about today are some of the top mistakes people make at conferences. And when I say a conference, this could be even a barbecue in the backyard. It doesn't have to be anything particularly formal. But just, some of the things that people don't do that I think could be well worth it for them. Why attending events makes sense. I'll talk a little bit about that. How to turn a random conversation into a meaningful one. Why you should be prepared to ask the first question, and I will share with you why this is a silver bullet for me, and then also some tools, apps, and other things to make this a good use. So one of the reasons why we don't like to talk to people at conferences is it's kind of like learning to drive a stick shift. And frankly, we don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to feel silly. We don't want to do it wrong. And so what we often do, I find, is we just talk to people who we already know because it's comfortable. It's like getting in our own car. And what I'm going to encourage you to do is to be a little bit more bold and a little bit more proactive on just reaching out to people who you do not know at conferences. And I have been surveying people for probably 15 years, and so far nobody has been mugged at a conference. But when we see all these people walking around, we're like, I don't know these people, so they're strangers. So I want to encourage you to take a look at these two cars. And so we've got the Maserati, and then we've got kind of a nicer car. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do is to find some less fancy moments where you can practice your conversation skills, where you are talking to people who you do not yet know. And so these people are often perceived as a stranger, quote unquote, but they're actually just somebody who you don't yet know. And so I'm going to encourage you the next time you're at an airport, people think I'm crazy, but talk to people in the security line. Everybody is frustrated. Everybody is bored. And almost everybody is looking at their phone because they don't know how to have a conversation. So start with the magic word, tell me, or the magic phrase, tell me, it's 2 words, and say, tell me, are you heading off on vacation or are you going somewhere for work? Is Boston home? Is St. Louis home? Is London home? Wherever you might happen to be. So practice in a place. And one of the things that I think is kind of fun about this is you are in a very safe place. There's so much security at airports. Nothing is going to physically happen to you that's going to be terrifying. And in many cases, you're going to find you're going to swap cards and end up having a conversation later. But this is like learning how to drive a stick shift on a car that doesn't really matter. Because then when you're at a conference and you see the keynote speaker or you see somebody who's very important, you want to not quite feel so anxious about talking to somebody who is, quote, a stranger. So let's start for a second and let's just do a quick poll here. Let's just do a quick poll here and ask, how do people describe you? How do people describe you? See how this works. If you can answer the poll there, do people describe you as outgoing or do they describe you as reserved? Oh, this is terrific. We have a lot of outgoing people on this one. Yeah. Well, good deal. So we have a lot of people on this webinar today who are outgoing. It's about 75% who are outgoing and 25% who are reserved. So what I'll share with you is that I find I test as an introvert, but I'm very friendly because I spent a good chunk of my life living overseas and also in parts of the Midwest. But I do find at times I come across as reserved. I come across. And so what I've learned is I have to come across as more outgoing, even if at times I don't feel that way. So again, practice on a stick shift, practice in places that are, not going to make you concerned or anything like that. It just makes it so much easier. I'm on a plane, I'm on planes a lot. And one time I'm on a plane and a little young guy looks at me and he says, "I'm 4. How old are you?" And I looked at him and I smiled and I said, "Well, I'm a little older than 4 years old." And he said, "How much older than 4 are you?" He had no fear. So what I'm going to share with you is we learn to be afraid to talk to people at these conferences. We learn to shy away from that. We learn to think, oh, maybe I shouldn't talk to somebody. I would be bothering them. I was at a conference recently of cardiologists, incredibly important people who take care of your health in a very wonderful way. And I was really surprised when several of the cardiologists were nervous to go talk to somebody who they didn't know but was in their industry. And so we had a little bit of fun with this, just getting them to practice walking up to somebody and just trying it. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is just really think about, why am I talking to this person? Am I talking to them to bother them? Am I talking to them to ask for something? Or am I talking to them to get to know them, to see if there is a match or a reason for us to talk? So imagine you're a young guy again, or a young girl. Imagine you're young and you just don't know to be afraid. And this is a really wonderful time when we really don't know fear. And because as we go older, we do get to know fear. Oops. And that's not necessarily a good thing. As I mentioned to some people in the beginning, I have a fever and I'm fighting a cold, so forgive my voice as it might go in and out just a little bit. So before you go, one thing I'm going to encourage you to do is to Google the speakers, Google the organizers, and find them on LinkedIn. Do not, please, 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 do not send them the generic LinkedIn, "I want you to be in my network." Instead, saying, "I looked at your LinkedIn. I noticed that we both share so-and-so, or we both went to such and such a college." Have a meaningful conversation, not just one that says, "Gee, I want to sell to you. I want to buy from you. I want to do business with you." Instead, find out who they are as a person. It will make it so much better for you and so much easier for you to actually connect. So let's actually talk about why you go to conferences. Help me understand why it is. Pick as many of these as you like. Pick as many of these as you like, ones that make sense for you. Why are you going there? Oh, I like it. Some people are going to see a new location. So sales is the number one reason, and that perfectly makes sense given who is on this and who you are. Also to meet other vendors and providers. And the other top one of these is to learn something new. And so one of the things I really encourage you to think about in these conversations you're going to have is ask people, who's been a favorite speaker you've heard so far? What's a vendor that you have found has an interesting product or service? Think about this as just really engaging them in a conversation versus thinking about it as a sales call. Because the more you can think about it as a conversation, the more you are going to be able to think about how you could actually help them. I went on a sales call, I guess it was Monday, and the woman was very candid, and she was like, I'm not sure we're ever going to need your services, but I'll keep it in mind. And but she does hire speakers. And I said, well, if you if you're looking for a speaker and it's not me, that's fine. Ask me. I know a lot of people. I'd be more than happy to make an introduction for you. And she wrote me back a note the next day saying, thank you so much for not just trying to sell to me, but instead trying to develop a rapport or get to know me as a person. So one thing you might want to think about is when you go to these conferences, think about what can you learn? What can you gain? How can you instead find a way for you to actually engage with other people in a meaningful way? All right, we'll close that up and we'll continue. And if anybody wants to put questions into the chat, I'm happy to talk to share those as we go along. We'll definitely have time later on. I'll share the results here real fast. So these are the results of the poll. All right, I'll share those and then we'll move on. Okay. All right. I love this bird. I just, like, who's going to make the first move and how did the poor guy get there in the first place? So in some cases, it really is important for you to just to be willing to make the first move. And it may make you very nervous. It may make you feel very anxious, but it's just simply having the ability and the willingness to just simply say hello. I heard a TED Talk a number of years ago, and it was a gentleman who was a plastic surgeon. And he was at a conference, and he'd had a rough few days. And he said, if you're in plastic surgery, you meet a lot of beautiful people who want to be a little bit more beautiful. And at times it can be very, just not a very satisfying career. So these two plastic surgeons were talking about this and trying to figure out, how to make their lives a bit better. And the gentleman who was sharing the story said it just took every bit of energy he had to make the first move to say hello to this man. And then it turned out this man was feeling the same way about his profession. And they talked for a little bit. I think the conversation maybe even started over the treats at breakfast and which one was a good one or a healthy one, etc. And they exchanged material. And then later on, they end up doing the first face transplant in the United States. And he shared this story about helping this man whose face had been blown off in an electrical accident, who had young children, and his children wouldn't get near him because he was so grotesque, and helping this man get his life back. And at the end, he started thinking, what if I hadn't gone to that conference? What if I hadn't said hello? What if I hadn't said, is that muffin a good one? So many people I find try and think about, they hate small talk over and over again. I hate small talk. How can I talk about something important? Well, there's nothing wrong with small talk. You don't want to stay there necessarily, and these two gentlemen didn't. They went into something very, very meaningful. But often it does start with a simple hello, how are you? What speaker have you enjoyed? What city are you from? And getting people to have a conversation. All right, this is a chart that has been debated very, very extensively. Having said it, I do think there's some worthwhile things to think about it. So right now, we are communicating with the blue and the yellow. You can't see me. I'll open up my camera in a few minutes, but you cannot see me, and so we're only getting 45%. I'm only sharing 45% of my communication power and my communication ability. If I was in person, or even if we were on video, it might be a little bit better. It's not going to be 100%, but you would see, am I slouching? Hopefully I'm not going to sneeze or doing anything too disruptive, but just a little bit more about that. So the reason why conferences and being in person is so important is because it makes such an impact on how we meet each other, how we stay in touch, different ways for us to get to know each other. And once you have done this once or twice, I find that it's actually, you don't have to do it very often. But the one-on-one is very important. When McGraw-Hill called me and asked me to write a book, I wrote the book and I said, I'm going to take the train from Boston down to New York and bring you the manuscript. And the editor said, you can just mail it. And I thought, I don't want to just mail it. This is something I've worked really hard on. And I said, will you have breakfast with me? I'll come down on the train and I'll bring you the manuscript. And so he said, sure. And I was the first author who had ever done this, who had ever delivered a manuscript in person. Now, fair enough, it wasn't that far away. That might have been part of the reason. But what I learned from that experience was later on, when we had some differences on the book cover and what should be on the book cover, he wanted the book to be very focused on job hunting, and nothing against job hunting, but at any given time, the percentage of people who are unemployed is much smaller than the people who have a job. And I wanted to help the people who had a job keep their job, succeed at their job, be ready for a promotion, be ready for, the next good things that were going to happen. I really wanted people to be very, very ready. So that was something that was really important for me to do. Let's see here. I'm checking. Are there any handouts? So we just a couple questions. Yes, there will be. You'll be getting the slides at the end. So I want to be sure people know that will be coming up. So if any more questions, just continue to ask them, and I will continue to answer them, and we'll have more at the end as well. All right. So thinking about this, if you send an email or you send a voice, if you send an email or a text, put your hand up and cover the red and the blue. So when you send an email or a text, you are forfeiting over 93% of your communication power. I mean, imagine that you would just put yourself in that sabotage situation. So I did this yesterday. There's a law firm in Washington, D.C. I'm going to be down there in September. We've talked a couple of times and, about me helping them out. And so I had sent them an email, but that was only 7%. So I left a voicemail and I said, hey, I'll be in town. Would you like to get together? And he answered me much faster. I think that if we had only done this on email. So realize you need to have multiple ways, multiple channels, multiple methods of reaching out and staying in touch with people. Otherwise, it's going to be really, you're just putting yourself at a disadvantage. So think about the multiple ways that you can do that. Okay, let's do another quick poll. All right, so when you go to a conference, what's your preference? Do you attend all the parties you can, or do you prefer to talk to people on a one-on-one basis? Oops. Oops. Kirti, can you help me show the poll again? Or can you see it?
Yeah, I'm able to see.
Okay, I must have put it off on my screen. All right, so what's interesting is that 20% of you said you want to attend all the parties you can, and 80% of you said you prefer talking one-on-one, which is interesting because it's a little bit of a different answer when I asked people in the beginning of the question, are you outgoing? So what I'm going to share with you here is that often outgoing people still prefer one-on-one conversations. So one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do is to email people ahead of time and say, I'm going to be at the conference. In my book, I talk about making a reservation at a restaurant for 8 people, and then inviting people saying, I got a reservation. Would you like to join my table? It doesn't mean you're picking up the tab. You could even say, the entrees are about $20 or the entrees are about $50, so somebody can have a general idea of, how expensive they're in for, and that you're not going to necessarily pick up the tab. But we do get a lot of benefit from having conversations one-on-one. Excuse me, I'm going to grab some water here. Thank you for your patience. Okay. This is a picture of my nephew. And bless his heart, he doesn't know he's in my presentations, but he's waving to the boats and he's saying, "Hi, I'm Drew. I'd love to have a ride." And he's waving to them and he's chatting to them. And it's just so precious. It's just so precious. And then all of a sudden, I start laughing and his sister starts laughing. His mom starts laughing. And we're like, because the boat can't see him. They have no idea he's waving. So what happens is his body language changed quite quickly. You see here, all of a sudden he pulled his arm in, he stopped waving, he stopped being friendly because we were laughing at him. So one of the ways that we learn to be shy, if you will, is people make fun of us. And there's a lot of conversation right now about bullying or being unkind. And that's part of what this is about. But the other part of what this is, are we really helping people understand the best way for them to communicate and a possibility for them to succeed? And on occasions, we should reconnect with our inner childhood. All right, so let's take a look at this picture. Let's take a look at this picture. And we're going to leave this up here for a minute. Kirthi, is it possible for me to do a last minute poll? If not, that's okay. But I'd like to see how many people can see the old lady and how many people can see the young lady. So
maybe
how many of
can
you
respond in questions?
Okay, sure. Once you write in the question, can you see both? Can you see the old lady? Can you see the young lady? Because it's important for you to be able to see both. And so I'm going to try with the pen here. So if you're trying to find these, okay. So the young lady, this is her eyelash. This is the edge of her face. And she's looking out. So hopefully you can see the young lady looking out. All right, so let me see if I can erase that. Yes, I can. And the old lady, these are her lips. This is her kerchief. This is her eye. This is her nose. And the reason why it's so important that you are able to see both is you want to be able to see what people need at a conference and what you have to offer. If we only see what we want to sell, it's going to be hard. If we see both what somebody else needs and what we need, it makes it much easier for us to communicate and connect. And find a way for you to actually be in touch with people. So part of it is really think about how can you, what are other people looking for? What do other people need? How can you help them? And what's the best way for you to communicate that? I was working with someone the other day. I don't do a lot with uh, job hunters, but the whole part of this was that oh, excuse me, I'm gonna get some water. Excuse me. So the whole part of this is to really say, what problem can I solve? When people walk in and say, "Oh, gee, I want to just sell to you," that gets old pretty quickly. And so be really mindful of how can you position yourself. And when I was talking with my friend who was job hunting, I said, somebody's looking for you. They're looking for a wonderful client, a wonderful employee. Yes, you're looking for a job, but that does not mean you're in an inferior position. Instead, that means you're in a position of helping somebody else because they're looking for you. All right. I just love this picture because sometimes it's just we're so burned out. And so one of the things we just kind of want to have a quiet moment. So what I do at conferences is I bring along a scarf and I just say, I want to feel like I matter. I want to feel a moment of quiet. I want to feel a moment of of peace. And because I get burned out, the more people I talk to, I start with a full tank of gas and it goes empty, 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 the more people I speak to. Whereas in other people who are more extrovert, the more people they speak to, the more happier they are. So at times I just go find a quiet place. And sometimes it's a one-on-one conversation, but I just need a place where I can put my head down. I do bring a scarf. I kind of roll it up into a little pillow and find a quiet space. So if you need a quiet space at conferences, don't feel like there's anything, quote, wrong with you or anything that you should be changing or doing differently. Instead, realize that you do need that quiet spot. That is something that is perfectly normal, and you want to find a place where you can actually do that. So I mentioned a little earlier the magic words, and my magic words are tell me, and those get people talking at conferences, and they get to talk about themselves, they get to engage in conversation, and you can continue the dialogue for there. So I'm a speaker at a lot of events, and one thing I have noticed is at the end of my talk, I sort of say, are there any questions? Anybody have anything that they'd like to ask? And it's absolutely dead silence. And it's embarrassing. I feel very awkward. I feel painful. I feel like, oh gosh, maybe, oops, maybe I've done something wrong that I shouldn't be doing. It's very, very awkward. So what I've learned to do is I am often the first person to ask a question of a speaker. And so this makes the speaker really like you, one. Two, you break the ice in front of the whole off conference and people see you. You get visibility by simply asking a question. I've done this multiple times in every situation. People have said, thank you so much for the question. In some cases, I try and ask kind of a quirkier question. I saw the other day on the TV that the TV show Murphy Brown is coming back. Murphy Brown's character is based on a reporter named Linda Ellerby. I saw Linda speak at a conference a number of years ago, and during the questions, nobody had a question. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's a very amazing reporter, survived breast cancer, had a lot of interesting stories to share. So I raised my hand, and in her remarks, it talked about how she had been raised in Texas, that she had been raised in Texas. She now lived in New York. And so I said to her, how did living in Texas shape you? And how is it different for you to live in New York? And she shared the funniest story about walking down the street in New York with her mother. And her mother says, sweetheart, they have a Saks here too. And Linda Ellerby has to break it to her mother that Saks is actually based in New York, not in Texas. And she said, Mom, I need to get you out of Texas a little bit more often. It made her funny. It made her approachable. She talked about her mom. There were just lots of things that people were able to engage from her sharing that story. And so part of it is just ask a question of the keynote speaker. They need you to ask the question. They want to engage the audience. They're not quite sure what has resonated and what has not resonated. So I really, really try, and I often try and think about a question that of something they have said during their remarks that's a little unique, that makes them a little bit other than, what keeps you up at night or how do you like running an organization? I try and go for something a little bit deeper. So I'm going to wind down with these apps, tools, some tips, and then we can go on video, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I am in love with Zoho's card scanner, and the reason why I like this is I can take a picture of someone's card. It automatically goes into Zoho as a lead. And then I can edit and create an action item from there. Now, this is good if you're doing cards on a one-by-one basis. It's not good if you're trying to do, 100 cards at a time. That would be a little bit, but I find this is ideal when you're at a dinner and someone's swapping cards. Another time I have used this is when I'm talking to somebody and they're like, oh, you know what, I only have a few cards left, which is kind of rude because what they're trying to tell you is they're not sure you are worth their card. So I say, you know what, let me make this simple for you. I'll just simply take a picture of it and I'll give it right back to you so you don't feel like you're having to, you're down on your cards. They see me being efficient. They see me being thoughtful. They see me being very organized. And so then the card is automatically into Zoho CRM. I can make some notes about when I'm going to next contact the person. Typically what I will do, ideally in the next 24 or 48 hours, is I do invite them on LinkedIn and I do a customized invitation. I really encourage you to not use the LinkedIn mobile app to do invitations. You can customize, it's a little clunky, but just wait until you're back at your laptop when you do those invitations. I also think it's a little bit weird when I've just had a conversation with somebody and then up pops an invitation. It's like, oh wow, let me at least get a cup of water or a cup of coffee or something like that. If you have lots and lots and lots of business cards, CamCard is a tool that I use because I can then clean it up, I can then upload it into a spreadsheet, and then I can import all of that over to Zoho. Let me share with you a few fields that I have customized in Zoho. So the birthday field is the day I meet you. So any of you who stay connected to me, who today would be your birthday. I really don't send birthday cards to people anymore. I might do a quick hello on Facebook or whatever it might be. But in general, I just don't do that. So the birthday field in Zoho is the one I use for the day I meet you. Zoho has a source, I think, field. So I use that for a drop down. I have a drop down for conferences. I have a drop down for networking. I have a drop down for people who I meet through social friends and family. I have a drop down for people who have contacted me via my book. So I have that. And then I have a separate field that is a custom field called met specifics. So I might put the name of the conference in there or something a little bit more specific. Another tool I like, another app I really like is called Evernote. Some people find it clunky. I actually find it great. And if you have the paid Evernote, which is about, I think, $50 a year, and you take a picture of someone's business card there, it automatically intersects with LinkedIn. So those are some really great tools and apps for you to use. Some of the other ones I would mention are ones that I'm guessing most of you are using all the time, such as Waze, Where Are You Going, and other things like that. If I do want to have something in person, I tend to use appear.in, Skype, or FaceTime. And those are a few of the other tools that I use to stay in touch with people. Just meeting people for the first time is not enough. You have to nurture, you have to develop, you have to stay in touch. When I look at the people who unsubscribe from my newsletter list, the number one reason is they're no longer interested. That's my fault. I didn't keep them interested. I didn't continue to send them interesting information because I'm so often worried they don't want to hear from me. I send it maybe 4 to 5 times a year. I need to do it more often. And that's something I'm actually hoping to get going with Zoho campaigns at some point. So what's next for you? What's next for you is to come up with an action plan. I don't worry about all the people who you haven't followed up with in the past. Stay focused on the people you're meeting today and then go backwards from there. But start with the people today and put in some best practices. Create those custom fields. Identify what you next owe them, why you want to stay in touch with them. And so that's the main reason for you to be in touch with them and figure that out. So the more you can do that and stay in touch with people, the better it will be for you to have those connections. And then when you need something, you call somebody and you say, hey, we met at such and such a conference. It's been a while. I want to ask you about such and such a company. They've asked me to do a project for them. Have you enjoyed working for them? So that's kind of the scoop. If you do want to get any information from me, I am more than happy to be in touch with any of you. You can go to www.dianedarling.com/Zoho and fill in that form, or we can chat now a little bit. I'm happy to turn on my webcam. I don't look too horrible, but and I'm happy to answer any questions and keep the conversation going. And I hope this has been helpful. We actually should have done a poll on that. Has this been helpful? Any questions? Who's going to be the first one to make me not feel lonely?
So I have got a couple of questions done.
Sure.
So, how has your book enabled you to make more connections? Sherry has got the question for you.
How has my book enabled me to make more connections? The book is a credibility tool. The book doesn't really make much money for me anymore. It did for a little bit, but not so much anymore. When I started this, there were so many, networking was kind of new, even though it was old, obviously, but it was a newer topic. And now anybody with a LinkedIn profile assumes they're an expert on networking. So I've got lots and lots of competitors. But it's a credibility in it actually because I did it long enough ago. It was old school. So that was something that I found has been very helpful for me to, have that as a credibility tool.
Do you use an email manager? Gordon has asked.
Gordon, hi, how are you? Let's see, email manager. I Gmail intersects interfaces with Zoho, so I tend to do that. It's overwhelming. Email is so overwhelming. I looked at it the other night and I have, 9,000 in my everything inbox, and it's just insane. It's why I do think in some cases it's important. We call people, we stay in touch with them, we continue to do that. Otherwise, we are going to lose connection with them. There's no doubt about it. Um, I will say, and hopefully all of you will come back for the next session where I talk about writing email. I do find that a lot of the emails I get um, make it too complicated for me to respond to them. Someone the other day wrote me and she says, I really want to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. And I had a moment and to talk to her, and I really didn't want to type it all up, but there was no phone number. I'm sure I have her phone number, maybe in Zoho, maybe somewhere else, but your phone number should be in your signature. Your phone mail should be really, really easy for you to find different ways for you to be sure. When I send an email, it comes from Diane Darling with a vertical stick, if you will, and then my phone number is right there. And people say to me all the time, I just love that because I know I can text you, I can call you. I'm very easy to get hold of. So I really encourage people to be sure you're doing this from multiple angles and not just email. People are just drowning in email.
Next question is, do you develop questions to ask speakers at conference ahead of time? Lobo
It,
wants
it
to.
varies. It's a good question. It varies. So I live here in Boston. Boston is headquarters for the New England Patriots. I saw one time the owner of the New England Patriots speaking actually at an event called Thai, the Indus Entrepreneur. There were 800 entrepreneurs, either Indian or Indian descent in there. And he's telling all these sports analogies, and then it came to realize that most of the people didn't understand football, so they were very intimidated to ask him a question. We didn't figure that out until afterwards, but I just asked him the question about people, and I'm like, "How did you decide to hire your coach, Bill Belichick, because he had been fired?" And he had some very interesting things to say about hiring somebody who had been fired and making a decision on that, understanding why he'd been fired, what was, how he would handle it differently. And needless to say, the Patriots and Bill and Coach Belichick and the owner have had a good long run, being a very successful team. So sometimes I think of something ahead of time. I think it's almost always safe to ask a question about how they are managing people leaving. Um, there is what's called a talent war going on. And so it's interesting to ask managers, leaders, executives, how are you keeping your best people? In my humble opinion, it's because they network internally. They have a time for people to come together and, meet each other. They have a community. Otherwise, people can just work remotely, and that's why some cases remote locations are working. It's why in other cases they're not. So
Michael has got a question for you. If not, if not able to be face to face, do you have any ideas on increasing the percentage you indicated?
I would do this. I've got my little video right up here. Do FaceTime, do Appear, do Skype, do something like that. It makes you a little bit better on how you prepared. It lets the other person know I want to have a conversation with you in that situation. So if you can't do it, I mean, sometimes when I'm traveling, I have a friend and she lives in Seattle and I live out in the East Coast. We'll get together for dinner on weekends, and we just kind of turn on our cameras, 6 her time, 8, 9 my time. I'm having dessert, she's having an appetizer, and we just have dinner together. So I just think in some cases, leverage the tools that we have. I think of my parents who lived in Asia before I was born. I'm not going to say what year. It sounds so old now, but and they were there before they had to write letters, and it took forever for them to get here from their family. So I think it's a really good thing to use these technology tools.
Next question. Abby has started complimenting us. Hi, Diane. Thanks for the nice presentation. Just one question. Tell me, how often should I follow up with people we meet at the conferences?
So I think there's a difference between how many times you follow up and how frequently you follow up. If you follow up with somebody every day, uh, it's creepy. If you follow up with somebody 10 times, but it's over the course of a year, it's less creepy. I will say in general, follow up at least 3 times. At least 3 times. I know for me, I love it when somebody I mean, I'll get a message, oh, I should call them back. And then something happens, and then as some time goes by, they call me back again, and I'm like, thank you for taking something off of my to-do list. It doesn't mean it's unimportant. It doesn't mean I don't want to do it. It just means that there's something else that's pulling at my time. I'm a one woman show. I do everything. And so part of what it is to figure out how you can really make yourself. And if you leave a message, so I have a way of leaving a message where I don't say my name first. I would say, Kirthi suggested I reach out to you. She's from Zoho. Is this a good time to catch you? Because if the person knows Kirthi, and hopefully I'm saying that correctly, um, then that's credibility. That's credibility that I don't have. If she says, "Oh, you should call Laura, my colleague in Austin," and I call Laura, I'm not going to start with, "Hi, it's Diane Darling, Laura. I'd like to talk to you." I'm going to start with, "Kirthi suggested I contact you. Is this a good time?" So put yourself in, if you have children, you understand this. You have no name. You have no name for 20 years if you have children. You're so and so's mom. You're so and so's dad. I do dog walking. I'm the dog aunt. Don't ever call me the dog grandmother. That happened one time, but I'm the dog aunt. So I think in some cases, um, it's just really, really important. Heather, I see your question is very similar. What to do when somebody doesn't call you back. Try it 2 or 3 times. If somebody said, use my name, go back to that person and say, hey, I'm not getting a call back. Send an email. Assume the best, but then, I try that maybe over. It also depends on the timing. The person who I spoke to the other day in Washington, D.C., we're talking about something on September 12th. That's 3 weeks away. I'm going to be on the phone right away. Whereas if we were talking about something in January, he's got other things on his mind. Let's see, Gordon, what voicemail do I leave? The voicemail I leave is, I promised Gordon I was going to give you a call. Is this a good time? Or if I get him on voicemail, I promised Gordon I was going to give you a call. I'm going to send you an email with my questions, or the reason or the purpose for my call. And so the subject line of the email, and we can talk about this in next week's session when I talk about that. I do have people pick up the phone for me. I am finding there's a lot of spam bots out there right now. I don't know if it's because I work for myself that I have lots of them, but I rarely pick up the phone unless your phone number is in my contact list. And my contact list is quite large, so I do have most people there. But I'm honest about why I'm calling. I said to someone the other day, I'd love to help you out if you need what I do. If you don't need what I do, you're welcome to call me back and say no, or just put that in an email. And I put that in the email. It's okay to say no. And one thing I would actually encourage all of you right now is to make the commitment for the rest of this week and next to call everybody back and say no if you do not want to buy from them. It's a good way to get that going. So,
Last question. Hi Dan, thanks for the webinar. I get most of my leads through email marketing. I'm quite good at it. I have been in BD for years, but only in my field since March. How do I pick up the phone and be effective when I don't know many answers to questions the leads ask?
So if you don't know the answers to questions that leads ask, you need to go to your company and say, I need some training. I need to learn this. I need to understand better, and come up with the questions that people are asking you. And you might want to do this with several friends. Way back in the day when George Bush, the first George Bush, was president of the United States, he was at a grocery store, and doesn't go to the grocery store because he's the president of the United States. He's also from a very wealthy family, and he had not ever done the grocery store, but he saw people scanning, beep, beep, and he says, "Wow, that's amazing." And you wanted to say, "Where have you been?" And to me, I felt that his team really let him down. They should have said, "Here's what a grocery store looks like. We're going to take you in, off hours. Ask your team who go to the grocery store, what are things that they find are frustrating about the grocery store?" There was a local story here in the news the other day that apparently I think the governor of New Hampshire, or maybe the mayor of a city in New Hampshire, he didn't like the way one grocery store put the price tag on the Ziploc for the meat because you couldn't use the Ziploc anymore. And so some guy tweeted this out, and next thing you know, the mayor or the governor is saying, "I know, I don't like that either." So you need to crowdsource. You need to get some help from other people. You cannot do this all alone. Is that a wrap?
Okay, so yeah, so yeah, I think most of the questions are answered, Dan.
Good, good. Ian, I have any scheduled conferences in Canada? Not right now, but I'm close, so let me know if I can help you out. Happy to come up to Canada. I love it up there.
Okay, so it looks like everyone's questions have been answered. Meet you all in the next webinar series on 29th of August for 5 ways to write emails that get answered. So if your friends and colleagues still haven't registered for this series, please pass on the link which Diane has shared it in the chat box and they get to register using the link. Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you so much, people. So meet you all.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.